Before dawn, residents of Ufa woke to a faint orange glow on the edge of the industrial belt, and to a network that began to feel sluggish. By sunrise, smoke was rising near the refinery district, and the airport had cycled through heightened restrictions before standing them down. By mid-morning, newsroom wires in Kiev were carrying the same core fact in measured language. A long-range Ukrainian drone had reached more than 1,000 kilometers inside Russia and had struck an oil refinery complex that was supposed to be far beyond the reach of nightly raids. The quiet assumption that distance guarantees safety no longer matched what people could film from their balconies. Shortly after midnight local time, reports pointed to the industrial corridor along the Brisky Tract in Ufa, an area that includes the Bashneft-owned Ufa Orgentez refinery. Local administrators moved quickly to acknowledge an incident and to frame it as contained, while transport authorities initiated what aviation workers called a carpet plan, a precaution that signals unusual activity in the airspace, before canceling restrictions once the immediate alarm passed. The early picture that formed across multiple desks was consistent. A drone reached the Ufa industrial zone. Residents observed smoke, mobile internet service degraded, and airport procedures reflected a brief alert period. The phrasing remained careful because details in the first hour often need confirmation, but the location, the timing, and the refinery context aligned across reports. A strike that far inland is significant because Ufa sits deep in Bashkortostan, far beyond the belt of border regions that have adapted to routine alerts. The 1,000-kilometer figure is not a headline flourish. It is the distance planners treat as a buffer when they assume that large plants can operate while frontline units absorb pressure. That assumption breaks if a single arrival can force a shutdown in a sensitive unit. The Kiev Post desk summarized the situation succinctly and placed the refinery by name and operator, while Ukrinform confirmed both the range and the location cues residents were pointing to in real time. When separate outlets, each with their own sourcing, describe the same smoke over the same road grid and the same short cycle of airport restrictions, the debate shifts from whether it happened to what the hit changes for the rest of the week. What most people can see is a plume and a glow, yet the real harm begins inside the process flow where each unit depends on the one before it. A refinery like Ufa Orgentez runs crude through an atmospheric distillation column, then routes fractions onward to vacuum distillation, hydrotreaters, reformers, catalytic crackers, and other conversion units that turn rough steams into usable fuels. Temperatures and pressures sit inside narrow bands for hours at a time. Valves track those bands, and control logic keeps the whole sequence in balance. A shock near a manifold or a control rack can trip the safety systems that protect equipment from overheating or overpressure. Those strips are designed to be conservative. They tell operators to stop the music, so nothing breaks that would take months to replace. When that pause begins, the impact travels through the tank farm, where feed and product are stored for short windows before the next handoff. Operators flare gases to stabilize pressure. They drain and cool hot equipment so inspection crews can confirm that steel and seals are sound. Quality teams test what was already in the lines to ensure that sulfur levels, octane, flashpoint, and other properties still meet specifications. If a hydro-treating line is paused, diesel or jet fuel that would have cleared that polishing step now waits in intermediate tanks, which means dispatchers must find the space to hold it or move it elsewhere. If the atmospheric column is slowed, every downstream train begins to idle. It is not smoke along that matters. It is the missing flow that the next link expected to receive at a particular hour. The logistics tail responds as soon as the first calls out. Rail schedulers look for sidings that can take a change in destination. Truck coordinators stretch their loops because the nearest replacement barrels may sit at a smaller depot that does not usually push that much volume. Pipeline controllers slow or resequence batches because the system is built to move different grades in order and to keep interfaces between products tight. The controller who does this work thinks in days rather than minutes. A single pause at a complex can mean a full day of reshuffling at sidings, crossings, and loading racks. That reshuffle reaches the clients who burn the product. Flight planners check whether they should tanker extra fuel into an airfield to cover a week of uncertainty. Convoy planners add patience to schedules because service stations and depots along the route may ration throughput to stay comfortable. City administrators who approve municipal fuel draws more cautiously because no one wants to be the town that ran a reserve too low. Even when a plant reports that it is stabilizing, the restart is gradual. Crews bring units up in a laddered sequence and watch one more for alarms that might suggest a hairline problem missed on the first pass. Each hour spent on careful heat and pressure is an hour that product does not move, which is why analysts pay close attention to repeat strikes while procedures are still being reset. If UFA Orgzintes slows again before it completes a clean restart, the same network will need to reroute product a second time in the same week. And that is when the calendar, rather than the headline, begins to carry the weight of the story. Air defenders often report a high percentage of interceptions, and on their terms, that can be accurate. Yet the success of the night belongs to the side that shaped the morning. A long-range raid only needs one arrival at the right point on the system to force a shutdown or a safety pause. The mathematics of this kind of attack favors the attacker because air defense must protect every sensitive angle while a drone needs only one angle. That was undercovered for a few minutes. Terrain shortens radar lines of sight. River bends, tree lines, and low rooftops can hide a small airframe until the last approach. Operators who plan the route build waypoint legs that skim the edges of jamming influence rather than push through the center. They travel when crews are rotating or when a scheduled maintenance window leaves a sensor quiet. They choose a wind and a ceiling that complicate tracking rather than a wind and a ceiling that make the target easy to follow. Then most of the wave is defeated and one airframe reaches a vulnerable part of the plant. The battle moves from the interceptor battery to the process board. Engineers face a narrow decision tree that begins with safety. If a shutdown protects equipment, they take it and accept that output will suffer. If a controlled slowdown keeps the plant safe, they choose that and accept that schedules will slip. Dispatchers then translate those technical decisions into the movement of product. The public sees a single sentence about delays. The shift chiefs see a set of tasks that will absorb the next day, even if defenders can show a favorable ratio on the night's tally. The refinery staff cannot run their columns on percentages. They need stable inputs, and those were lost the moment the right unit tripped. The deeper value of an interior strike is that it adds a new ring to the defense plan. Batteries that have been assigned to ports, bridges, and rail nodes become candidates for reassignment to inland plants. If they move, the sites they leave behind are thinner. If they stay, the interior accepts the risk that a second route will be attempted while procedures are still settling. Either choice is real. Either choice creates an opening for the next 48 hours. That is why one successful arrival can outweigh a long list of interceptions. It writes the next day's tasking for engineers and dispatchers. It reshapes where commanders feel nervous. It lengthens the time it takes to return to a normal rhythm. And in a campaign that seeks pressure rather than spectacle, that long time is the outcome that matters. The timing complicates Moscow's broader effort to pressure Ukraine's energy grid as the cold season approaches. In the same window that Ukraine reported air defense work over multiple regions, there were public notes about hits on other Russian refineries. And the weekly situation updates were already cataloging the pattern of inland strikes reaching beyond border belts. A defender that decides to ring interior refineries with more protection is a defender that must accept thinner coverage at bridges, rail junctions, and ports, while a defender that keeps forward coverage as the priority accepts the risk that another 1,000-kilometer route will succeed. Either choice carries an operational price. Either choice produces a gap that the attacker will try to exploit within a day or two. This is why the UFA incident matters as part of a campaign rather than as an isolated clip. It forces a recalculation about where systems are parked and about how much slack exists inside a fuel network that has already been under pressure. The first signal to watch is a lull in official detail from Bashkortostan, since silence often means safety teams are working and schedules are being redrawn. The second is unusual traffic at alternative depots and sidings, since longer queues of tankers and railcars point to rerouting and temporary storage. And the third is tempo changes at nearby bases and airports, since quiet reductions in non-essential activity are a way to conserve product while capacity is restored. In the public record, there are concrete markers already. Reports place the incident near the Brisky Tract that runs through the industrial zone, identify the refinery as UFA Orgzintes under Bashneft, note mobile internet problems around the time of impact, and confirmed that the airport cycled through an alert posture before lifting restrictions. Those markers give analysts clear points to check in the coming days, from visible work at the plant to traffic patterns at surrounding depots. If a second strike lands before those patterns normalize, the lesson will be straightforward. Distance is no longer the protection it was assumed to be. And a system that depends on long interior routes can be slowed by strikes that do not need to succeed often to be effective. If this gave you a clear view of what changed rather than a stream of noise, like the video so it reaches more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications so the next verified breakdown lands as soon as we publish it. And tell us in the comments which link in this chain you want tracked next. The Long Island pipelines that feed the Urals, the sightings that stack tank cars before dawn, or the coastal terminals that light up when schedules slip. Share this with one person who still thinks 1,000 kilometers is a shield, because tonight showed how quickly that belief can fade.